Welcome back to Hell to Pay podcast. I'm Elle.
And this is Amr.
And I'm Sipo.
Okay, today we are going to be talking about one of my favorite stories that I've ever covered, and I wrote about in my first book. It's a very bizarre, sordid tale about a woman who was called Brazil's Mother Teresa, and quite extraordinary legal case that transfixed Brazil in 2020. I'm also going to be breaking out into a cold sweat because trying to pronounce Brazilian Portuguese names is really difficult. This may be what gets me cancelled before we've barely even started. Enjoy the butchery. I need it to be like Brazilian footballers who just have like a cute little diminutive for all their names. But anyway, we'll dive into it. And I mean, part of the reason why I think the story is so interesting as well is that it really explains this huge religious and cultural shift that's been going on in Brazil over the last couple of decades. So the characters in question are Anderson de Carmo de Souza and Flordelis dos Santos de Souza, who were a husband and wife couple of Pentecostal preachers. She was more of a gospel singer, but did a bit of preaching as well. Her husband became quite an influential pastor, and they came from a favela in north of Rio. They had 55 children. All but 4 had been adopted as street children. And Flordelis became known as the Brazilian Mother Teresa. She had a movie made about her life. They had, some really famous actors in it. This great selfless kind of story about, how she just took in all these street kids out of the love of her heart and so on.
This is like a baseball roster of kids. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. I mean, 55 kids in one home. I mean, there's, some... So we'll find out later. It might not be all that it seemed, but...
Yeah.
I mean, look, beginning with Anderson. So Anderson was actually one of her adopted children originally. And probably more interestingly, he was originally her teenage daughter Simone's boyfriend. So he moved into the house before she'd adopted all these kids, and she wound up adopting him as one of her own, which his mother didn't particularly like because he, came from a fairly normal family, was raised by a mother and father, and then someone else comes and adopts him when he's about 17. Next year, he split up with Simone and made their mother his wife. So he marries Flordelis, and then they start adopting all of these kids.
Did he say that he always dreamed of Flordelis? Like, this has always been his dream to play for the Flordelis club, etc. and so forth.
But, yeah. His boyhood club.
Yeah.
And so in the 2000s, Flordelis sort of used her growing celebrity and the success of her and her husband's church to enter politics. So there was a really big wave of evangelicals who sort of was slightly ahead of Bolsonaro, but a lot of them came into the Brazilian Congress in 2018 on the Bolsonaro wave. In very crude terms, he's a fairly good analog for Trump in the US in that, he was an outsider from politics, had a lot of, just fairly sort of tabloidy right-wing populism. But I think the real undercurrent, which is really interesting and definitely goes across both countries, was that evangelical Pentecostal wave of people who really got behind that form of populism, both sort of ideologically and spiritually. In Brazil, I mean, they had to change the WhatsApp global policy because there were so many misinformation texts that were going around Brazil about, they're going to make your 6-year-old son wear a dress to school and start going by they, them pronouns and all this kind of like just blatant misinformation. But it really took off, and Brazil used to have the highest cell phone rates in the world. So things like WhatsApp coming in was really transformational because everyone does everything over WhatsApp in Brazil. It's, business, it's how you speak to your airline, your bank, all those sorts of things. So the misinformation, it was sort of the biggest platform in Brazil by a long way, and it was very easily spread in that you could send these messages to unlimited amounts of people. So that Pentecostal wave culturally that was coming through the country wound up being very significant, and Flordelis was a big part of that. They were also a part of Brazil's Pentecostal turn that's really exploded since 1980. So just Brazil used to be the world's largest Catholic nation. It actually might still be, although Philippines might have taken over now. But in 1980, only a couple of percent of the population were Pentecostal or even Protestant. And now it's there are about as many Pentecostals or evangelicals in Brazil as there are Catholics. They've basically undone like 500 years of faith in 40.
Yeah, that's incredible. Where's this movement coming from?
Well, it's fairly localized, I guess. I mean, obviously it was missionaries from Canada. I swear to God, Canada, we keep giving Canada such a bad rap on this podcast. There's always like some Canadian underbelly.
Deserved. Very much so.
So there were originally some Swedish missionaries that had brought it, it's sort of the turn of the 1900s. But it was really a Canadian preacher who was really big on prosperity gospel and faith healing, who came down in the 60s or 70s. And he influenced a young guy called Agia Macedo, who was a street preacher who was having all sorts of health issues, who came from a very poor family, from the favelas in Rio as well. And really took this preacher's message on board and really translated it, I think, for a local audience and made it very Brazilian. And I mean, today he's a billionaire. He started the Universal Church of the Kingdom of God. So it's this heart-shaped logo. They're certainly in South Africa, the United States. They're sort of popping up all over Latin America. You see a lot of them in London as well and around the UK. So it's become just a very sort of big box Pentecostal megachurch that's very, very emotive. It's really into, prosperity gospel, faith healing, all the stuff that tends to appeal to people, to converts in the developing world particularly.
By the way, this is how you know that the Pete Hegseth types, the fucking freaks in the new Trump admin, they're not serious people. Because if they were, they'd order a crusade on Brazil because it's losing its papist nature, right? If you have a Deus Vult tattoo, you should be sending Marines to Rio to make everyone Catholic again.
But see, most of the OG Trump guys were all like Pentecostals and charismatics. So they were Paula White Cain and all of that. Yeah, it's just your JD Vances and all those tradcath guys who are, kind of have this like veneer of intellectualism over the top of what is basically the same kind of Christianity, just that, hyper masculine UFC Jesus kind of stuff that they just try to, drape in a couple of Harvard gowns.
No doubt, but 100%, but I'm just saying it would be funny if they accuse the Pope of not taking Brazilian Pentecostalism seriously, put up an anti-Pope in Washington, and declare a crusade on Brazil. Sorry, I'm playing way too much Crusader Kings lately, and this would be my run. This would be how I would play it.
Well, I mean, they're just really obsessed with Pope Francis now.
He's like Satan to them, yeah.
Yeah, because he said, I'm a communist and Jesus would have been a communist.
Yeah. Which I always hate it when people accuse historical figures of being communist. Like, Jesus didn't have the materialist conditions to be communist. That's not how it works. But that's neither here nor there. I'm just being a pedant. But yeah.
He wasn't dialectic enough.
Yes, kind of. Like the material conditions for communism didn't exist when I'm not gonna go on a tangent there. That's a trap right there.
You need the Industrial Revolution.
Yes, absolutely, yes.
I love the argument that the Pope is having with J.D. Vance at the moment, where the Pope damn near issued a papal bull against the Vice President of the United States.
Papal bull
because
bullshit,
he said that
man. Send in the Swiss Guards. Send in a detachment of Swiss Guards to Washington, D.C. You think Rodrigo Borgia would have allowed this level of disrespect? Like JD's head would be adorning a fucking wall in the Vatican right now.
Oh yeah, they'd be wearing a suit made out of his skin.
Yeah, like fucking... Like this is how far we've fallen, man.
Well, one of the things why Brazilians really got into Pentecostalism, I mean, it's the traditional things. It's health and wealth, basically. So your prosperity gospel, your faith healing. But there was also the authenticity of the movement. The Catholic Church in Brazil was kind of seen as like being really stale and bureaucratic, whereas your Pentecostal preacher is the equivalent of of a spiritual startup. And it's really been taken on by poor people, mixed race people in the favelas and the fringes of the Amazon rainforest, who traditionally, your Catholic priest is just a guy who's like upper middle class who's been educated in Spain or Portugal and then sort of just parachuted into this like incredibly impoverished community, and they just like can't connect to their flock. And whereas like your Flordelis and your Andersons and that, they're people who grew up in the favela, who look and sound like they're not constituents, but that's almost the word that came up, you know, but with their congregation. And they just know, you know, the challenges people are facing. Like the one big innovation that Ajay Macedo really did, which all the other Pentecostals have taken on now, is that he started opening church at like 5 a.m. and midnight, because he understood that all the people in the favela were working like 2 jobs and having like really long commutes and things like that. And they just couldn't, you know, like 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning, they had to be somewhere else. So they just started opening church at all times of day and night. And that's when like, so working class people could, you know, sort of get their spiritual fill on their way to or from work.
The Uberification.
I would be very worried if they started doing that in South Africa, because we also have the same issue of these insane commutes for people. So they haven't, church in the middle of the night is an innovation, I think, is a step too for South Africans.
Well, they have it in Lagos. So there's this huge highway that goes into Lagos, and it's just littered with mega churches now, just all the way along. It's just full of mega churches so that people can do it on their commutes, because often they're like, you know, 3-hour commutes to and from work to go work in the city. I mean, Sipo, didn't you say that South Africa have some of the longest commuting, or like black South Africans have the longest commuting times in the world?
Well, yeah, these studies keep coming out that say South Africa has the longest commute in the world. But when you speak to people who, you know, the social scientists, they'll tell you that actually specifically, that number is jacked up specifically because of people who live in townships and have to drive. Well, they catch what in South Africa is called public transports, which are minibus taxis, but they're transport for the public. You know, they're all privately owned taxis. So some people have to get up at 4 a.m. in order to be at work on time, and they only arrive back at 8, 9 o'clock at night.
Damn.
Yeah.
That's wild. In so back to the story of Anderson and Flordelis. So Anderson was really rapidly growing his church. It was charismatic. He was good looking. He was riding this Pentecostal wave that was really, really going crazy in Brazil in the sort of late 90s, early 2000s. Still to this day. And then he kind of, you know, the classic thing of, you know, something getting popular, and then so he just kept wanting to grow and grow and grow his church. He was quite obsessive about it, sort of falling out with a lot of old friends. The people that kind of rose up with him was, you know, casting them aside. So he was, you know, he was very successful, but he wasn't doing himself any favors, I think, necessarily in his community with his old friends and family. He was, you know, the classic kind of preacher thing. Once they get more successful, you know, the watch gets bigger, the shoes get shinier.
Oh, yes.
The cars get nicer. I mean, I think you would have seen a lot of that in South Africa, right?
Yes, yeah.
And then in sort of 2018, 2019, some things started happening to Anderson. So he was poisoned with arsenic, and there were a number of botched attempted robberies on him in his house and outside. He was starting to be, you know, a bit paranoid, but as the adage goes, just because I'm paranoid, it doesn't mean people aren't trying to kill me. Okay, so 15th of June 2019. Hasn't been a great time lately for Anderson, but he and Flordelis have date night. So they go down to Copacabana Beach, you know, the famous volleyball, girls walking around scantily clad, you know, people just playing football, I almost said soccer, on the beach, you know. Just a classic part of Rio. And they had date night, which involved having sex on the bonnet of their car down by the beach.
Okay, calling it a bonnet now. Come on now, behave, okay?
Wait, what is it? The hood?
The hood.
The hood. Oh, gosh. This is the thing. I've been living in America for so long, but I forget my brain defaults.
Americans will exercise castle doctrine on you if you say bonnet.
The bonnet does sound kind of funny when you put it like that. So yeah, they have sex on the hood of their car, very classy, and then they're driving home, and a motorcycle starts following them. And you know, this is after the poisoning and everything. So Anderson's obviously a bit spooked. They got home and he's parked in the garage. Now I'm nervous about all my pronunciations.
Sorry, I was just messing with you, and it's too.
No, it's funny. My boyfriend, like I said, always gives me so much shit. But yeah, how do I say garage? Garage? Garage.
I say garage.
Yeah, okay.
Garage, yeah.
Yeah, I think we say garage, but yeah. Anyway, so Anderson pulls up the car, parks in the garage, and Flordelis goes inside. He was still sitting in the car, just like finishing sending an email to someone, when she hears a series of gunshots. So she runs back down there, and he is just like Swiss cheese, just riddled with bullets, lying in a pool of blood. So obviously, screaming, getting the children up, everything's going on. But he was
all 55 of them.
Yeah. One. Imagine doing like that Rolodex, like, when your mum gets mad at you or something and you're young and she can't think of your name because she's like so angry and like goes through all the relatives.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
So, getting all of it's like, yeah, the reindeer or whatever, just going through all the names, getting all the kids downstairs. So, complete chaos. He is immediately dead, just absolutely riddled with bullets. So straight away, the Brazilian police launched what they called Operation Luke 12. So it's a passage from the Gospels when Jesus tells his disciples, "There is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed or hidden that will not be made known. What you have said in the dark will be heard in the daylight. What you have whispered in the inner rooms will be proclaimed from the roofs."
It's too damn Pentecostal.
Jesus has a big Lana Del Rey vibe about him. I will say that.
Which is to say, in, a much more lyrical sense, that robbers, when they're startled, don't usually shoot someone 30 times, and they don't usually shoot them so much in the groin. And a household's guard dogs don't tend to stay quiet when there's robbers hiding in the garage, which all means all a way of saying that they suspected that it was someone much closer to home or perhaps inside the house. During Operation Luke 12, it started coming out, and this is just like the stuff of just the tabloids in Brazil were going nuts for this stuff. Stuff's just coming out in the papers every single day. Family life, shock horror wasn't as it was portrayed in the film that they made. I mean, for starters, her 4 biological children just couldn't cope with suddenly having, 55 brothers and sisters. And, they're all, needless to say, pretty fucked up in the head. And then it turned out that all but 5 of the first generation of adoptees, so she kind of adopted the kids in tranches.
In tranches? It's a draft pick. Every year they have a draft, and she picks 5 or 6.
That's right. You got your Wembies, and then you got your water carriers, right?
Yeah, lunch pail 9 to 5 kids. The kids who they might not be who you build a family around, but they'll carry you in garbage time.
Absolutely. So the biological kids and like 5 of the first generation, they all got to stay on the top floor of the house and eat with mum and dad and all that kind of stuff. The adopted kids lived on the lower floors in squalor. They said that they were beaten with baseball bats. They were just chucked like a packet of hot dogs, for dinner and said, just eat that. They didn't, get any good food. I don't think they had, great education or anything. And Anderson used to say to these kids that they were all fallen angels and that Flordelis was sent there to save them. And he would say, it is God in heaven and Flordelis on earth, as their way of disciplining them, as well as, the baseball bats. And as you might have guessed from their date night before they died, they were also just complete sex freaks who had all sorts of weird rituals going on, sleeping with some of the kids, having...
I was going to say, presumably they molested some of them.
Yeah. And they, sort of had some friends over. They had some weird thing with honey and an apple. It was all very, very weird. And then, of course, the good preacher and the good gospel singer were really big into a local swingers club.
Respect.
Also, the weeks before the murder, Anderson discovered that there were plans coming from literally inside the house to murder him. And he had threatened to bug the telephones of everyone in the family home, which is that's kind of CIA level operation when you got 55 people living there.
Were they all living in one home, all 55 of them at the same time?
I think some of them came and went, and some of the kids were fairly well grown up. I mean, definitely some of the older kids were grown up by then. So I'm not sure exactly the dynamics, but at various
presumably
times,
there would have been a shitload of people in one house.
Yeah, and a shitload of phones. So
I had 3 younger brothers, and that was too much.
Can imagine. And this meant that the plotters who'd plotted to kill him had to communicate with burner phones, which wound up sort of becoming important in the investigation, but go into. Because unfortunately, the plotters weren't particularly bright. It turned out that one of the biological sons, Flavio, was the one who did the shooting. And when police were actually able to move in on the family compound and make arrests, there were 10 of the family members. Well, 10 of the children were implicated and arrested. So it's like 20% of the family. And then Simone, so the biological daughter who was originally Anderson's girlfriend before he married their mother, she did my absolute favorite thing when it comes to like dumbass criminals, which is just Googling your crimes before you do them.
I'd never stop doing that. That's how we get content for podcasts, is when some lunatic is like, how to find knife, how to clean knife, how to get rid of bloodstain in car, can bleach clean. By the way, the worst thing that ever happened with the enshittification of the internet is like, imagine doing a crime now, like in today's day, and like fucking Gemini or whatever is being like, you must use tea to like just dog shit advice, like you know, if you mix baking powder, you will clean blood in a fucking knife, and it's like, what the fuck are you talking about? I'm trying to get away with murder here.
Yeah, it's like how to get away with murder, and then you add Reddit on the end so that you cut out of those shitty Google
brutal
ads. And I always love like the the kind of language, the way that people use language to Google now. So it was like her searches were like assassin, where to find, poison that kills. And she said that the reason that she was making those searches was she wanted to do the humane thing for a friend's dog who had a tumor.
Oh, god damn. These people they're not sending their best, folks. This isn't the A-team.
They're not sending their best people. Lucas, one of the adopted kids who'd recently been arrested for like, very minor drug dealing. He had been offered by some of the favored and biological siblings. He'd been offered $850 to try and arrange the killing, which, Flavio, the biological son, wound up doing.
He could have bargained to at least like $5,000. Come on, negotiate, man.
Yeah, your dad's like a prosperity gospel preacher. Like, you got people handing over the keys to their car in a moment of ecstasy. In all of the investigations into the kids, they're all texting each other, doing their Google searches. Nothing's very well thought out. And so the police are able to get a hold of their phones and work things out pretty quickly. And it turned out that the person behind the killing was in fact Flordelis herself. So she wanted to apparently get control of the money. The church, as I mentioned, had really grown. They had, I think, maybe up to 5 of them. A lot of money was coming in. She would go on to say, that Anderson was very controlling and, sort of hinted that maybe he was abusive towards her. And it started to be rumoured that the reason that she'd actually gone into Parliament was because of Brazilian laws that give members of Parliament basically blanket immunity for crimes, and that she had gone into Parliament so that she could have her husband killed, and if she got caught, get away with it.
That's incredible.
Which is, it really does, like, there needs to be a sequel to the original movie, because it's just like, just getting it, like, a really dumb group of people to, like, try and commit this crime with, so many obvious trails back to the source of who wanted to do it, but thinking that they're still committing the perfect crime because she's in Congress.
Yeah, I think these people don't understand how immunity works.
Yeah, well, she didn't understand it very well because she was pretty promptly arrested, and she has a pretty fantastic Instagram page. If you're ever of a mind where she's, constantly just talking about how innocent she is and writing these, very long tear-stained posts about the media conspiracies against her. So she kind of did that throughout her various trials. So in June 2021, the Ethics Council of Brazil took away her position in Congress, which meant that
the mandate of heaven.
She lost the mandate of heaven.
Her scheming court eunuch. Well, she killed her scheming court eunuch, but her other court eunuchs plotted against her. The viziers.
Exactly. And I mean, he literally would have been, because, that was just the detail that kind of fascinated me, that I'm assuming it was Flavio's first murder. And he's just, just absolutely wailing on this guy who's become his dad, but just like blasts the shit out of his groin.
Yeah.
Like just, so he actually like did
There's
make
a lot of Freud going on there.
A lot. And so, she got originally done by the Council of Ethics for breach of parliamentary decorum, which is just a detail I don't know, I kind of like. And then that obviously paved the way for her being able to go on trial. So eventually in November 2022, she was convicted of murder and sentenced to 50 years in prison. Various children were convicted of various other things as well. And as of 10 days ago, I was looking at her Instagram this morning, and that she's still trying to get a retrial and say that, you know, she wasn't given a fair hearing and that she needs a new jury and all the usual stuff. And she also got caught in her cell with a cell phone. So she's now in solitary confinement, and she lost her spot singing on the prison choir.
Brutal. Getting benched, that's brutal.
That's actually adorable that they have prison choir, something that you see quite a lot of in South African prisons. They do a sort of barbershop quartet sing-along style, some of the scariest murderers in the world.
But yeah, voices like angels.
Yes.
I mean, I think there's such a strain, especially in Brazil and all over South America, really. You know, there's always those like documentaries where someone goes inside, you know, a South American prison, and they basically just have these like full communities and commerce. But obviously, like, there is such a strain of the religious. That's one of the reasons why Pentecostalism has really exploded in Brazil and across South America, is that, yeah, Pentecostals are just way better at like going into jails and converting people, whereas the Catholics are just kind of like, you know, we're going to sit here and read some Aquinas and get ourselves caught up in papal decrees and all that kind of stuff. And the Pentecostals are like, yeah, let's just go get us some souls, boys. Let's kind of fire
let's jump
everyone
around and like sing at the top of our voices and have ecstatic experiences. I kind of get it. It's so much more just alive, you know?
Yeah,
Just
it's vibrant.
the way of being, yeah.
I mean, the moral of this story is that Flordelis should have hired a professional. You don't do amateur stuff with this.
Yeah, it's especially if you're going for the bag. Like, the bag was very clearly in sight.
Yeah.
She thought she had her immunity, she was going to get all the church money, and then she just got the idiot kids involved.
Yeah, she should have hired Ray Shoesmith. I wonder what he's up to these days. Got into Mr. In-Between recently, and I'm like fascinated by that kind of person, you know?
This is so, you know, just the making it up as they go along, you know, just being like, okay, let's poison him. Okay, how do we poison someone?
Yeah, it is very much the deaf, the dumb, and the blind leading one another. But also, like, again, you want First of all, you want as little connection to the crime as possible. So you don't hire your fucking family. You get someone who is otherwise unrelated, and then you have plausible deniability. And, you know, like, this shouldn't be a podcast where we're instructing people on the best way to, you know,
to do crimes.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's like, man, have some fucking self-respect. If not for yourself, then for the profession, at least, for the love of the game, you know.
I'm certain that everyone at some point, you know, you're watching a film or something, and you're like, I reckon I could plan a perfect murder.
Oh yeah,
everyone's had a
I've
thought.
that situations before, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've got like your chemistry background or whatever as well. You know about like blood, how to get rid of blood.
I make no comments pro or against that, but I don't know what you're talking about. This is deny all allegations that would indicate that I have any such knowledge. Just for the record, again, I would not know any. I have no idea how to commit any sort of crime.
I would like to
enter the Mounties are listening.
Yeah, you would also like to enter the United States again in future. I should say, as a visa holder in the United States, I've never committed any crimes. I have no plans to commit any future crimes. I never think about crimes.
They should do a refugee program for Bogans.
Yeah, Bogan Australians.
Yeah. That should be a great Those are people that I can imagine would work in the heat in Arizona for you know.
The problem is Australians in America just, you know, want to work in Los Angeles. Feel like it's
that's fair.
Just, Sydney by the other side of the Pacific Ocean. All right. Well, anyway, that is the story of Anderson and Flordelis and how not to commit an imperfect crime.
Wow. It feels like one of those Hollywood movies. Oh, man. What was the one that I watched recently where the criminals are all so stupid, but and then they do awful things, but then it's played for laughs. I think Raising Arizona, where they're kind of like not paying attention and also doing the most horrifying crimes imaginable.
Those doing bad crime, that's like either Coen's or Guy Ritchie. Those are the two.
Oh yeah.
I think of.
So is
Guy Ritchie's criminals though they have pathos to them. They have like they're somewhat charming. Whereas every Coen character is like awful. Like I hate them so much.
I love Coen brothers.
Oh, I love them. I love like some of my favorite films are Coen brothers films, but like the characters within are so like deeply unpleasant in a very like specific.
Yeah, they
type
know how
of
to
way.
write a really annoying guy.
Yeah.
So just on Bolsonaro himself, obviously his rise is also deeply tied to the whole Pentecostal movement.
Yeah.
Is the movement itself like self-referential? Do they see themselves as right wing, basically, is what I'm trying to ask, right? Or is it more like across the spectrum and people on all sides are in it, and so is it like apolitical that way?
They have a very strong base which overlaps. It's not one for one. There has been some research done, and it's been a while. So I think it was like the very, very poorest didn't tend to vote, or aren't really voting for Bolsonaro. But a substantial portion of people living in, below the poverty line, or, sort of week to week, that sort of thing, tended to vote for Bolsonaro and convert to Pentecostalism. And then obviously sort of like, further up the tree as well, I think, it's a lot of the uber rich and stuff are converting because they think that, that God has like given them, because prosperity gospel is just such a big thing there.
Yeah.
So they obviously look at their circumstances and look at prosperity gospel and go, well, God's given me favor. But yeah, it definitely is faith, family, flag, that kind of self-reliance, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, don't expect government to give you things. And I mean, that's why, the perfect example is that like all of the Brazilian footballers pretty much all convert to Pentecostalism, all tend to be from the favelas and are all like to the right of Genghis Khan.
Yeah. Getting baptized in swimming pools and stuff, like,
yeah,
my God.
Yeah, all the Brazilian guys who played for Liverpool or did they all became like Hillsong guys, weirdly.
Yeah.
And in the swimming pool, Allison, the goalkeeper's like especially like really, really, really into it.
Isn't he a fully apostle?
I think so. He's been trying, but he's like very, very heavily involved with his church at the very least.
We need a cultural revolution, man. These people need to be put in like labor camps until we figure out what's going on over there. I'm sorry.
The problem is you'd have to do it to Africa too, because a lot of this is paralleling
very much
what's
so
happening on the African continent, and especially how Pentecostalism is seen as an innovative approach. I was brought up in quite a traditional Lutheran, so quite conservative Protestant church, and you sort of sit very still and you sing like someone died. You're not allowed to be like, joy is not allowed, and people who are wealthy are supposed to be ashamed of it, and it's so like you can't vibe to that. It's not a fun Christianity at all.
No vibes. Yeah, that's one of the things that Pentecostalism has done like really, really well all over the world, but particularly where it's growing in Africa and Latin America, is that because there's like no central authority, so it really is able to look and feel and sound like the local culture. So traditional music is often like a very big part of Pentecostal services. It's very ecstatic. But yeah, I've been to Pentecostal churches in like South Africa and Mozambique, and you can really see that for a lot of people it is very closely aligned with like practicing traditional culture and traditional music and things like that. Whereas when your directions are coming from Rome or the Archbishop of Canterbury or whatever, they're just not going to have much time for that kind of stuff or much understanding of why it's meaningful.
Absolutely.
The Catholics have just been like just absolutely fucked by people converting to Pentecostalism in South America. Because the thing is, you don't convert people who aren't already religious.
Yeah,
exactly. You convert existing Catholics and just be like, sure, if you need to keep your saints, fine, but here's like a better and more meaningful way of doing faith that says that you can have a good life in this one as well as the next.
Yeah.
And kind of dispense with all that kind of dour, guilt-ridden Catholicism and just be like, hey, have a good time, go out and play your football, dance, music, do your traditional stuff, whatever kind of feels good. As long as, we kind of stay within these bounds. And yeah, it turns out that's really successful.
Awesome.
Thank you for listening to Hell to Pay. Please subscribe, like, share, tell your friends, and stay tuned for more.